Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Conversations with Cleo, and this one's really special. In fact, I want to introduce you to just friends and classmates that I've known, my goodness, forever since high school at Von Steuben High School. And the interesting thing that you're going to find out about is that we are all from a class that really has produced three authors. And these three authors, myself, Russ, and Susan, but I'm sure there's more. But I think that's pretty unique. But anyway, say hello to Susan, Dawson, and Rus Bradburd. Guys, how are you guys doing?
It's good to be back, Cleo.
Fantastic, man. Now, Susan, where are you at right now? And Russ, where are you?
I'm in Belfast in Northern Ireland.
Northern Ireland, my goodness. I'm in
Yes.
Houston, Texas, and we're going to connect and talk a little bit about Von Steuben. We're going to talk about books. We're going to talk about writing, and I think we're going to have a little fun today. So just a couple things. I want you to think about Von Steuben. And Russ, I know you were there for 2 years, your freshman and sophomore year, and then, of course, you left to Pennsylvania and came back to Chicago. And could you just share, let's start with you, Susan, share a memory of Von Steuben or an experience that you enjoyed and probably that you carried with you to this day that influenced you.
One thing that I carry with me to this day are the number of people that I was able to meet, the variety of people I was able to meet while I was there, from different cultures, from different backgrounds. I think that probably has served me well. It wasn't just one particular person, it was the variety of people and the experiences that I learned about that they had and that I was able to share with them. So I think that's probably the biggest thing that I took back from the school.
You know, I enjoyed my time at Von Steuben, and by the way, every day was good for me, and also had a chance to go to Corkery, a great school. Of course, you guys, Peterson, of course, the graduates and alumnus, but I'm sure you had good experiences there. What about you, Russ? What was an experience that you enjoyed?
Well, what sticks out to me, I do remember that it had a very international feel. I remember someone telling me once that there were 28 different languages spoken in the ESL class, English as a second language. But what I took with me is there was a very sort of, even though it was the early 70s, there was a very 1960s feel, kind of a peace and love kind of vibe. A lot of the boys had long hair, and there just seemed to be a minimum of tension for being such a with so many different ethnic groups and different colors and that kind of thing. It just seemed like a real sort of warm vibe at Von Steuben that I've always, and part of it for me, Cleo, frankly, we moved when I was a junior in high school, and I've always had a nostalgia about Von Steuben that might be overdone. I had it in my mind as a very special place, and I'm still in touch. Obviously, I'm still in touch with some of the Von Steuben people.
I think that's fantastic. You know, it's I enjoyed Von Steuben and a lot of good memories and experiences, which brings me to the next question. And this is a Von thing. And on the north side of Chicago, I think we had roughly about 1,100, 1,200 students. I think it was the smallest, of course, Chicago public high school. And that being said, the things you kind of represented and shared about Von Steuben, I agree 100%. So, question: one person or teacher that you remember most? And let's go with you first, Susan.
Mrs. Bjorklund, she was a freshman English teacher, and she was passionate about what she was doing. She was very personable about it. She seemed to care about the students quite a bit. And so I would have to say that she's the one person that sticks out in my mind more than any other teacher. Despite the fact that I was mainly a science person in high school, I wasn't an English person. I avoided English as as much as I could. But she was probably the one person who had an impact, and I had her freshman year, so I think that made a difference as well.
She was pretty good. What about you, Russ?
Well, I'd have to give honorable mention to Miss Bjorklund, and she was a wonderful person. And what sticks with me, Susan, about her classes, I still remember those books that, was Catcher in the Rye and A Separate Peace, Man Child in the Promised Land, of Mice and Men. And I had her for freshman and sophomore English, and I thought I really loved those books. But I would have to say Harvey Browse, who was the history teacher he was originally the reason I started off as a history major at North Park College, was I loved Mr. Browse's classes. so much. But also in a basketball, we've talked about this a little, I think, Cleo, is that he tapped me on the shoulder once. You know, as you know, I wasn't a very good player, but he tapped me on the shoulder during dribbling drills and pointed at the point guard for the varsity team and said, if you practice your dribbling drills, you could be just like David Chalmers. And that really stuck with me. It was just like it was like he lit a fire underneath me, just with a simple sort of encouragement, but a very direct challenge kind of, you know. So I've always remembered that, and I've stayed in touch with Mr. Brous. I think he wound up sort of switching over to track and cross country after he left von Steuben. But I thought he was, both him and Miss Bjorklund, I thought were great. And there, I could go on and on about Mr. Keem was a great teacher, and Mr. Wall in mechanical drawing. There's several great teachers I had.
If I were to answer the question right, first of all, a good friend of mine, and rest in peace, was Big Doe Waldo Harvey, Jr. And Big Doe is the one that gave me my nickname, Sugar Bear or Bear. He was a longtime friend and big influence on me at von Steuben. But Mrs. Brown, who was English teacher, African-American English teacher, and she was someone that I appreciated. There's a story that I probably hopefully get time to tell later about Mrs. Brown. But Coach Brous and Wolf, they were, and Coach Hood, all big influences on me, which kind of parlayed us into basketball and sports. We're all connected through basketball, through sports. Susan, you were voted in the senior class top female athlete, and Russ, you went on to play over at North Park as well. But a question for you guys, and specifically for you, Russ. I played the game, you played the game, but someone who played, sometimes I think as a basketball player, we just enjoy playing. I don't know how many of us think about when we're playing that we will one day coach. But you transitioned from a player to a coach, not just the coach at the high school level, but also coach at the collegiate level with some great Hall of Fame coaches. Did you always know that you had a little bit of coach inside you?
No, I don't think, but well, by the time I got to North Park, I did. You know, I rarely got in the, I'm generally considered the worst player in North Park college history. But during the games, I would, you know, the one year I was on junior varsity 2 years, and then 1 year on the varsity. And clear, I was so bad I got cut as a senior. So you have to be very bad to get cut. But I would sit next to Dan McCarroll, who's going into the small college Hall of Fame. Actually, we should nominate you for the small. There's a small college Hall of Fame. Did you know? And it's for Division II and Division III schools and NAIA. But I was sitting next to Dan McCarroll during the games, and or next to Bosco Jurakovic, who was his assistant coach that had great success himself after Coach McCarroll left. And I just listened to them talk and the way they thought about the game and the way they. But the other thing that happened to me at North Park was Coach McCarroll was big on the scouting the other team, and you had to learn the other team's offense. And because I was not a guy who was getting to play, I was always one of the main guys on the scout team. So every game we'd play, I had to learn a new offense to put in against the starters. And we didn't go full speed, but you know how you go over sort of 3/4 speed, but to keep learning other teams' offenses all the time and their traps on defense and that kind of thing, it really opened my head, because as you know, there's more than one way to do things. You could coach like Lute Olson, or you could coach like Nolan Richardson. There, you don't have to coach the same way, but there's something about doing the scout teams and being on and being a bench warmer on a championship team that in retrospect was good training for a coach.
Susan, you went on, and of course, you were very athletic and academically gifted. You went on to Augustana College. I like to tease the small Augustana school, not the one in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, but that's just an inside joke. That being said, you went on, and not only were you participating in track and basketball there, you also went on and got a really unique degree and had an amazing 40+ year career in healthcare. Two things. What did you learn from sports? And did you always know that you had a calling for healthcare?
Those are two good questions. Yes and yes. So yes, in that I knew when I left Chicago and started applying for colleges, I knew that I wanted to go into medical technology. And that might sound really strange, except for the fact that I had spent so much time having my blood drawn when I was growing up. that it made me inquisitive about what was going on behind the scenes. And so because of that, I was always curious to find out, and I always wanted to go back in the laboratory at the hospital to find out what was happening there. And so my curiosity came from that. And then when I found out it was a whole career, and Augustana happened to have one of the best programs in the country for the study of what they called medical technology. It's since been renamed several times to clinical, and now has landed at clinical laboratory science. That I knew I wanted to do that. So when I found a college that kind of fit my criteria, I wanted something small. I wanted something that was fairly close to Chicago, but not too close. Someplace I could start my college career without any strings attached, be totally myself, someplace new, someplace totally different. That was important to me. And so I ended up at Augie, and I ended up in medical technology. And I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. I spent a lot of time in science classes. That was great with me. As far as what I learned from my experience in sports is, you have to realize that at the time, Title IX came in when we were just entering into high school. They didn't even have girls' sports teams freshman year. It started sophomore year. I guess if I would have known that the world was about to change, maybe I would have worked harder at developing a whole lot of athletic skills long before I became a sophomore in high school, and I might have done better in the long run. But what I learned was perseverance. What I learned was to keep trying. I learned about leadership, not from being a leader so much on the court, but by observing others, watching what others were doing. I went on later on to coach kids in softball, and which is kind of unusual in that it's fast pitch softball, and I cannot play fast pitch softball because I have no depth perception. But I certainly found that I could coach kids as far as being able to work with them, build up their skill sets, encourage them, get them to work together. All these things that I saw other coaches do, and the examples they showed me. So I was able to pass that on in a sport that personally I can't play, which is kind of unusual, but that's the type of stuff I learned.
Go ahead, Russ.
I guess that's interesting to hear Susan talk about that. And it is a great tragedy in America. When we were kids, Cleo, was 1 out of 30 girls played girl sports. And now it's 1 out of 3.
Right.
And so there's been quite a shift, and that's all Title IX and that kind of thing. But for me, I think it was sort of sustained effort. I've gotten where I think that, being as bad of a player as I was, I think it was good training for being a writer and for being a coach. I remember spending months trying to make sure I could shoot a left-handed layup, for tryouts on the sophomore team, because I didn't even try out as a freshman. But I think that kind of idea that it's going to take you months to get good at something is good training for a lot of different things. In today's world, we can go on the app and I can order something from Amazon instantly. I hit the drive-through, the drive-through, here's the food instantly. And I think the way the world is set up now is built for instant gratification. But to be a good writer or a good basketball player or a good fiddle player, it takes sustained, and long years and years of effort. And so that was actually the hardest thing to teach my students as well is, in a way it's good to be impatient. As coaches, we're all impatient. We want the team to get better now, but you've got to be patient, and it might take somebody years to come around and to develop and that kind of thing. So anyway, I would say sustained effort was the big thing that I think that I learned from sports.
You guys mentioned some great things, and you talk about patience. Patience is not one of my virtues. In one of my first book, Coffee with Cleo, I wrote a story about the power of patience, and I'm not a very patient man, and I practice patience, but I agree. You have to get to it, you have to go through it. And so you have to be able to understand it's going to take time. But you set up the next section of what I want to talk about. Russ, you just wrote a book. I have it right here.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, it's called Big Time. And this is a pretty interesting book. If you haven't had it, it's a good read. I'd say get this one. All Von Steuben folks, former Panthers or current Panthers or anyone who's interested in and reading good stories. But Russ, I believe 6 books you've written.
Well, I've published 5 books, but I'm working on the 6th one now here in Belfast.
Okay, I got a question because Susan is the neophyte. She's writing her first book. We'll hear about her. But Russ, a question: why do you write?
Well, I think in retrospect, even to go back to our days in basketball, I think what always interested in me more in even in basketball were the stories behind the stories behind and also for us, Cleo was very much basketball as a window into Black culture, which is something I found really interesting. The music and the dance and the dress and the mannerisms and the speech, and but especially playground basketball, I was fascinated with. But I think even when I was coaching in El Paso at UTEP with Don Haskins, or at Illinois with Lou Henson, these are two of the greatest coaches ever. And I don't know if I could drop a single play of either of theirs, but I've got some good stories about both of them. And I think for a long time I was more interested in the stories. Even now, if I go to well, do you remember when in the last NBA playoffs, Halliburton's father ran onto the court and yelled at him?
Yes.
I found that kind of thing found that more interesting than the games. I think the stories, whether it's LeBron wearing an "I Can't Breathe" shirt, or or that kind of thing, the tie-in of politics and culture, or what's going on with Caitlin Clark, and is she getting more attention than Angela Reese? I find the stories behind the game much more interesting than the game. And I think, at one time it's probably not a great thing to have as a coach, is to not be paying as close attention to the X's and O's. But the X's and O's were never as interesting to me as the stories, whether it was Billy Six Gun Harris in Chicago, or some of the playground kind of legends. And was Ronnie Lester, what happened to Ronnie Lester, that he wasn't as good as Isaiah Thomas after he got hurt? And there's just stories behind it that I always found much more interesting.
Speaking of best guards ever, Isaiah Thomas, I've seen him destroy many people. There's lots of tombstones with former Ball names on them, inscripted, trying to guard Isaiah. And he was the only guy that I didn't want to guard because I knew I couldn't, and I did not want
Yeah,
to.
well,
I didn't want to be one of his victims. But Susan, you have a new book that's coming out. Tell us the name of it.
Growing into Leadership: Lessons I Learned Along the Way.
Yes, and give that name again.
Growing into Leadership: Lessons I Learned Along the Way.
And so, why do you write?
I started writing just because a couple of people encouraged me to write down some of the crazy things or some of the unusual events that I had been exposed to, or that opportunities that I had been given, and because we're stories to learn out of all of, and lessons to learn out of all those stories, as I should say it properly. And in sharing, I found as I grew in my leadership journey that I used a lot of these lessons and told a lot of these stories over to other people, and they were just like, "Oh, that makes sense to me. You're making it make sense." And so, what might have seemed like a complicated situation to them, or a situation that the subordinate couldn't handle, suddenly they were able to handle, because I said, "Well, think about it this way, and this happened to me." And when I did that, I discovered that they were just like, "Oh, I can remember that." And so the power of being able to tell a story around a concept was valuable. And I just started, people said, "You should write, you should write." So some people encouraged me to write, and I started writing. Just in healthcare in general, leadership is something you kind of learn along the way. Oftentimes, people who are in healthcare spend the majority of their time in science classes, and in science oriented, everything is around, anatomy, physiology, the body, the whole thing. And very rarely do we spend a whole lot of time learning how to deal with people on a one-to-one basis, and especially in leadership. So uh, when I started writing the stories, I suddenly discovered that the application was a lot wider than just the medical field. As I started to talk to people about the stories and extending it out, I discovered, oh, maybe it's like this for other people in other industries and in other businesses. And so a lot of the stories are applicable, I found, across a number of different um, careers and career choices. So I thought, try it, see what happens. So I
Right.
wrote.
Your book will be out this month, right?
Yes.
You know, you both talk about storytelling. I agree with you both, Russ. When you talk about the NCAAs, the games are great, but the stories behind the people that play the games, the coaches, the students, the fans, I think really captures us in ways like none other. And
I
Susan,
think that's right.
mhm.
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead.
was going to say that, Cleo, I know you've read some of the essays in Susan's book, and they're really brilliant. And I think what stands out for me, I think we're wired to be told a story. And so, like in Susan's book, there's a lesson in each one. It's through the stories that they come alive. So, if I say to you, Cleo, tell me about yourself. Sorry, Susan, I know you're a sciencey person, but if I say to Cleo, tell me about yourself, he doesn't say, well, I'm a type O blood type. I'm 189 pounds. I'm 6 foot. It's you tell the story of your back. I grew up on the west side of Chicago. My parents, blah blah blah. That kind of thing. I went off to school in Iowa, where it's through stories that we and even I would say even I don't want to argue about religion, but I think even to the it's through the stories that something like the Bible or anything else, even a history lesson. That's why Mr. Brous was such a great history teacher. I think is there was a story that went with it, and whether it's the Bible or the Quran or the history book, you have to be told a story. If it's just memorizing dates, it doesn't really. But I think we're wired. I think we're wired as humans to for storytelling.
I agree. It is, there's a workshop that I give, and it's all about storytelling and trying to construct whatever you're trying to achieve, whoever you're talking to, through a story. And people, hey, I'm a left and right brain guy. I like data, facts, figures, but people may not always remember the data, the facts, the figures, but they will remember a story that you've told. And a good story is not often told again and again, it's shared forever. So I think storytelling is an underrated skill, and I think it's a powerful way to communicate, to inspire, or to share information, no matter who you are, where you are. But
Yeah, I was going to say I think that you could say that whichever lawyer tells the best story wins the case, and the
yeah,
salesman who tells the best story wins it. And their college basketball recruiter who can tell the best story about his college. I think there, and even from the time I think we all have kids, and from the time they want to be read, a story or told a story at bedtime. I think we're really, and then it goes on with watching television shows and movies and reading books. They're all a form of storytelling.
another question for you two. Susan, you're new to the game in some respects. The hardest or most challenging thing that you find about writing, and for me, you're putting yourself out there. You're vulnerable. You're sharing your works to be celebrated or criticized, and it will live in perpetuity. That's a daunting thing, but it's also encouraging. You got to have a lot of courage and commitment. But what is the one challenge or the hardest thing you find about the writing process? And Russ, I'll come to you after this one on the same question.
So what you've mentioned is probably the hardest, but at the same time, I would say that sometimes for me, I'll have a bunch of thoughts swirling in my head all at the same time, and being able to put them in order in a way and make them come alive
Mm-hmm.
I want someone to get past the first paragraph. And so making sure that I can structure the words in such a way that they're like, yeah, I want to read a little bit further because I think I have something important to say. So that's why I'm writing, right? But can I have that hook to bring someone on to read the second and the third and the fourth paragraph? Sometimes I think that's the hardest thing for me, because I'll try to get too many thoughts into a paragraph, or then I pare it down to too few thoughts in a paragraph. So I think that's the hardest part. But being vulnerable is probably number one, that someone will turn around and criticize what I've written or say that's not true, or reject whatever it is, and it's kind of like, well, that's your feeling. This is still me, and I'm proud of what I did, so I'm going to go ahead and do it. So I think that's one, but number two has to be making sure that what I'm saying, the hook is there, and that they want to read on, because I think I have something important. I know I have something important to say, and I want to get that across in a way that they can relate to.
You know, Russ, you just retired, of course, in university. You were a college professor, and you taught what again?
Creative writing,
That's right.
fiction, mostly
Great.
mostly fiction, but a little
Right.
bit of nonfiction, but mostly fiction.
Yeah, and I asked you, I wanted you to share that with everybody because I think there's interesting, and not just that you're teaching it, but you're sharing the gems and wisdom and constructs for students. But what do you find the most challenging thing when it comes to the writing process?
Personal level, Cleo, I will tell you that it's related to that sustained attention thing that I talked about before. The internet is not good for me. Excuse me. I have a
Yeah.
I have a tendency, I think I'm slightly ADD, slightly OCD or ADHD, whatever. But the internet is, so for me, the internet is a distraction that there's something about the internet that makes my brain go back and forth like this, or more than it usually does. And so for me, not looking at the internet and not being affected by the internet is related to my ability to sustain my attention for long stretches. And my teacher was a man named Robert Boswell, who was a big basketball fan as well, but uh, that he taught me a method and all of us, but especially me, because we weren't, we weren't the smartest kids, we weren't Ivy League kids. But what he would do is have you write a bad draft and print it, and then fix it, and go back and constantly read it aloud. Read it aloud, mark it up as you're reading it aloud, then go back and fix it again, and that sort of multiple drafts, and having one draft, taking yourself from the first draft to the second draft to the third draft. And what I found with this method is, wouldn't it be great if I could skip from the second draft to the 20th draft and just be done?
Yeah.
But there's no way to do that. There's no way to do that. You have to go through the struggle to get from. And so for me, you said the difficult part is it's never gotten much easier for me. Like, I think I've gotten a little bit better and it's slightly easier, but instead of having to do 20 drafts of a book now, maybe I only have to do 14 drafts. But it's that slog that has never, I feel like it always feels like I'm climbing uphill all the time, and so it's the slog that I find, the most difficult part. But it also has allowed me, I think, because of my ability through, or my lack of ability in basketball, to keep practicing, even though there wasn't much of a payoff. That practicing without a payoff is good training for being a writer.
It's tough. I think that the biggest thing for me that's challenging is to be able to not just tell, but show, and do so in a way where people cannot just emotionally connect, but visually be there right at my shoulder and feel and see the things that I'm writing about. And of course, the editing, and editing that you just talked about, Russ. Guys, I'm gonna get you out of here, and I appreciate Von Steuben folks here getting together who write and love. But I got one more question for you. Uh, we're all from Chicago, and Susan, it's not Chicago. What is it? You have to say it one more time because we just missed you.
Chicago.
Yeah, Chicago. It's that. Yeah,
Chicago.
yeah. It's that accent there. Um, Chicagoans have a pride. Can we agree? This when you don't have to prompt them. If you're from Chicago, you say it immediately. I'm from Chicago. Can we both agree? Can we all agree on that?
Yep.
You both have traveled the world, and you still travel the world. Russ is in Belfast, Ireland, and Susan, I know you spoke all over. What is one thing you carry with you, Susan, whenever you go, no matter where it's at, that is Chicago, pure Chicago?
Blunt.
Yeah.
Being straightforward. I think I learned that early on in Chicago. People have a tendency to say what they feel and own what they feel, or own their thoughts and emotions, and I think that's probably something I carry with me. That I'm a good listener,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm going to give you an honest response in return, an appropriate response, but an honest response in return.
Right.
So I think that's probably the piece that Chicago taught me, is, to speak up, to say what you need to say, to be who you need to be, and have confidence in it. So I think that's probably the thing.
What about you, Russ? As he would go, AKA Lou or Sweet Lou, what would you say?
Well, I think it's related to my time at Von Steuben, and also my father. The best thing that my father gave all of us is a love of ethnic food, and I think what I take from my time at Von Steuben in Chicago is being open to other cultures. And, initially it was through food, where, I know about I know a little bit about Korea through Korean food, a little bit about Ethiopia from Ethiopian food. And I think food is a great sort of bridge to other cultures. But as you know, sports can be too. I haven't traveled the world for basketball, but I've been a few places, Australia and Finland and Croatia and Ireland. And Switzerland, I'd say those are the ones that I've been to for basketball. And there is something to me from growing up in Chicago where I'm interested in other cultures. Chicago is never a monoculture kind of, it's just always a very interesting. Driving down Lawrence Avenue or taking the Lawrence bus, which I still do from time to time. It's like being at the United Nations. And I just think the world would be boring if we were all the same. And thank goodness Chicago's not boring.
That's right. Guys, I appreciate you. Chicago, I carry with me that confidence that no matter where I'm at, I know that I'm from Chicago and I've seen and almost done everything. But to your point, I'm open to new experiences. But I want to say this, 3 authors from Von Steuben, Russ's book, Big Time, get it on Amazon. And of course, Susan's book is coming out, Growing into Leadership. Check out her book, get that as well. Guys, I appreciate you. Go Panthers, and we'll talk soon.